After nearly 10 years of explaining Star Wars online, I've come across the same questions again and again. Today I'm going to try to answer as many of them as I can in one fell swoop. Here are the 40 most frequently asked questions about The Empire Strikes Back answered.
Well, the bounty hunter we ran into in Ord Mantell changed my mind.
Who was the bounty hunter on Ord Mantell that made Han Solo want to leave the rebellion? We actually haven't seen the full version of that story in canon, but in 1981, a comic appropriately titled The Bounty Hunter of Ord Mantell told the legend's tale of Score. Sometime after the events of A New Hope, he was able to kidnap Luke and Leia, hoping to lure Han into a trap so he could collect on Jabba's bounty. Of course the plan failed, the rebels escaped, and Score was arrested by the Empire and sent to the spice mines of Kessel. He escaped months later and attempted to capture or kill Solo on Ord Mantell a second time. They struggled over Han's blaster, which went off and killed Score. That comic isn't strictly canon, but a character resembling Score appeared in 2 episodes of Forces of Destiny that took place on Ord Mantell, and The Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view mentioned the character in the story The Wills Strike Back.
It's metal.
Then it couldn't be one of those creatures.
Why is Echo Base such a mess in some scenes? You can see trash lying around and medical droids tending to injured or dead Tauntauns. The Empire Strikes Back was originally going to have a sequence where wampas attacked the rebels of Echo Base. The creatures would have run amok until being trapped in a room that snowtroopers would eventually open, only to be attacked themselves. Although several of the scenes were filmed, the ice monsters never looked quite right, and so the wampas were mostly cut from the film, but you can still see evidence of their destruction, like the medical droid or the warning sticker on the door that contained them. Despite those scenes being deleted, they have been referenced in several Star Wars stories since, like Shadows of the Empire, Forces of Destiny, From a Certain Point of View, and more.
Then I'll see you in hell!
Does hell exist in Star Wars? Han Solo rudely tells a fellow rebel, Tigran Jamiro, that he'll see him in hell before heading out into a blizzard, so that would suggest there must be a hell or some similar realm in the galaxy far, far away. The novelization for A New Hope makes reference to Chaos, which is another word for Tartarus, the Greek mythological version of hell, as well as the deity of the same name. In Star Wars, Chaos is also known as the Void, or Hell in Corellian mythology. It would appear that different cultures had different interpretations of the realm, but none of them seemed pleasant. Some followers of the Force believed the Void was inhabited by the spirits of dead Sith and other dark side users. How did the Wampa hang Luke upside down? I don't know why I get this question so often, but I do. I'm positive this is one of those pulpy Star Wars things you're not really supposed to think about. Luke hanging upside down puts him in extra peril and gives him a chance to show off his new telekinesis skills. But it is funny to imagine the Wampa holding Luke up to the ceiling by his legs, waiting for them to freeze. I imagine the creature had to slobber all over Luke's boots and then stick him up there. In Hoth's temperatures, it probably didn't take long at all. Also, Wampas are semi-sentient, so it's not unreasonable to think they would have figured out how to keep their meat trapped and fresh, as if it were hanging up in a meat locker. When did Luke Skywalker learn to use telekinesis through the Force? The book Heir to the Jedi takes place shortly after the events of A New Hope and shows us the first time he used the Force in that way. Without Obi-Wan to guide him, Luke largely had to train on his own. On a mission with a rebel named Nakari Kellen, she was fascinated with Luke's powers and encouraged him to attempt to move a noodle while they ate together. He was successful, and although it was a small victory, it was proof of Luke's growth in the Force. Other books, like The Weapon of a Jedi, went on to continue the story of his solitary training without a master. Why did Obi-Wan wait 3 years to tell Luke to go to Dagobah? I don't think we have an official answer for this, but there is an important factor we need to take into account. Primarily, when the movie was made, the 3-year time jump hadn't been established. The story needed to get Luke to Dagobah, and so Obi-Wan's Force Ghost gave him a little nudge. But in-universe, I think we can rationalize this a couple of ways. It's possible Luke simply wasn't ready to see Kenobi, the same way Ben wasn't ready to see Qui-Gon in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Or Luke's near-death experience could have opened the door for Deus Ex Machina to show up and offer him some guidance. We also have to consider that Force Ghosts exist outside of space and time, as illustrated in the From a Certain Point of View book for A New Hope. This starts to get into headache and nosebleed territory the more you think about it, but the fact of the matter is, Obi-Wan's spirit knows when he will visit Luke again as soon as he dies, so he knows when the right times to appear are. Basically, we can just chalk it all up to the Cosmic Force knowing what's best, and as part of the Cosmic Force, Obi-Wan aligns himself with its timeline.
There you will learn from Yoda.
Why did Obi-Wan call Yoda the Jedi Master who trained him? Did he forget about Qui-Gon Jinn? No, of course not. Obviously, at the time of making The Empire Strikes Back, I think Yoda was meant to be Obi-Wan's master. The character of Qui-Gon Jinn hadn't been created yet. But now that we know the full story of the prequels and the fact that Obi-Wan was Qui-Gon's Padawan, we also know that Yoda had a passion for teaching younglings, so he had a hand in every Jedi's training. Not to mention, it would have been odd for Obi-Wan to tell Luke to go to Dagobah to find the Jedi Master that trained him when he was a kid, and oh man, I wish my real master were still alive, but oh well, beggars can't be choosers, Luke.
He looks strong enough to pull the ears off a gundark.
Han Solo tells Luke he looks strong enough to pull the ears off of a gundark after recovering from the wampa attack. So what is a gundark? They were large, ferocious creatures from the planet Vancor. They had 4 arms, massive claws, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. They were formidable opponents, so telling someone they were strong enough to pull the prominent ears off of one would be an impressive feat. They first appeared in the Clone Wars episode Dooku Captured, where they were seen to be trouble for even Obi-Wan and Anakin. R2-D2, however, handled them fairly well in the episode R2 Come Home.
Set your course for the Hoth system.
How did Vader get command of the Imperial fleet? In A New Hope, Vader was basically the Emperor's attack dog and existed outside of the Imperial military, but in The Empire Strikes Back, he leads the entire Starfleet. How did that happen? As the sole survivor of the Battle of Yavin, Emperor Palpatine placed much of the blame for the loss of the Death Star on his apprentice. He also challenged Vader with several rivals that could potentially take his place. For the following months, the Sith Lord removed his enemies one by one until none were left standing. He also worked with the rogue archaeologist Dr. Aphra to create a personal droid army he could use to overthrow the Emperor. Although that plan fell apart, Palpatine was pleased to see his apprentice following in the footsteps of the Sith of old. Reaffirmed of Vader's dedication to the dark side, Sidious gave him command of the Imperial fleet. When was the Super Star Destroyer Executor constructed? It was completed at Kuat shipyards shortly after the Battle of Yavin. It was originally meant to be the flagship of General Tag, who had survived the destruction of the Death Star after investigating the supposed rebel base on Dantooine. But an Imperial doctor named Silo attempted a coup against the Emperor by stealing the massive ship. He was stopped by Darth Vader, and the Sith Lord's success prompted the Emperor to entrust the Executor to his apprentice. Vader force-choked General Tag shortly after. What is Darth Vader's pod on the Executor? It was a meditation chamber that doubled as a life support system. When closed, it was pressurized and pumped with oxygen that allowed Vader to safely remove his helmet and suit. In the films, we only see it on the Super Star Destroyer, but it was originally planned to be included on the second Death Star in Return of the Jedi in a sequence that was removed from the final cut. In the book Tarkin, we also see it moved to Grand Moff Tarkin's ship, the Carrion Spike, so it was able to be moved around to wherever Vader required it.
The fleet has moved out to flight speed and we're preparing to...
From how far away can you choke someone? Is there a limit to the distance? In theory, I don't think so. It's similar to Luke thinking lifting an X-Wing is different from lifting a rock. It's only different in his mind. We see Vader force choke Ozzel over a Zoom call, which could have been miles away on the Executor. We've also seen Darth Sidious force choke Count Dooku over a hologram from a completely different planet. I think a Sith Lord being able to see their target, even over a hologram, helps significantly, but at the end of the day, it's just like any other power in the Force. Get over the mental hurdles that tell you something is impossible. Visualize your goal and believe it can be done. I gotta say, it feels weird to give a motivational talk about force choking someone, so I'm gonna move on.
You have failed me for the last time, Admiral.
What exactly did Admiral Ozzel mess up so badly, and why was his failure so big that it warranted death in Vader's eyes? Darth Vader specifically says, Admiral Ozzel came out of lightspeed too close to the system. This is related to an earlier line delivered by General Riken. With all the meteor activity in this system, it's going to be difficult to spot approaching ships. Basically, if Ozzel had taken the fleet out of hyperspace farther away from Hoth, they could have drifted in undetected and bombarded the rebel base before they had a chance to raise their planetary shields. But since Ozzel instead came out of hyperspace close to Hoth, the energy surge of several ships exiting hyperspace at once was picked up by rebel sensors, and they got their shield generator online. Was Admiral Ozzel secretly a rebel agent? That's a fan theory I've seen a handful of times, basically suggesting that his incompetence was all a ruse to help protect the rebel base. He first attempts to discourage Vader from looking into what the probe droid found on Hoth, and later comes out of hyperspace too close to the planet, alerting the rebels to the presence of the Imperial fleet. Did he nobly sacrifice himself to give the rebels a fighting chance? No, there's nothing to suggest that. Kindle Ozzel had a story in The Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view where author Charles Yu writes about the Admiral's final thoughts. He actually brings up whispers he had heard among his fellow Imperials that he might be a rebel sympathizer, but the story makes it clear that Ozzel had chosen to side with the Empire and was loyal to them. He was simply as clumsy as he was stupid.
Understood? Yeah. Good luck.
What is Leia's military rank in The Empire Strikes Back? By that point, she was a general in the Rebel Alliance. The Star Wars comics set in between episodes 4 and 5 show us the deaths of several of the rebel leaders seen in A New Hope, like Generals Dodonna and Willard. After Luke, Han, and Leia narrowly escape a massive Imperial attack, Mon Mothma contacts them to inform them of their promotions. Luke is given the rank of commander, Han becomes a colonel, and Leia is promoted to the rank of general at the age of 20. So by the time of the Battle of Hoth, she may have been promoted further to Grand General or something, but I think it's likely she is still the same rank.
Good. Our first catch of the day.
Why didn't the rebels fly away from Hoth in the opposite direction of the Imperial fleet? I would say it's possible that the Empire had the planet entirely surrounded, leaving the rebels with no good options for escape, but it does look like the Empire is basically just on one side of Hoth, so why are the rebels flying directly into them? When trying to prevent escape, the Empire would need to focus on blocking the known hyperspace lanes going in and out of any given system. Those are the safest ways to travel because they are known to be free of obstructions. Hyperspace is dangerous to just jump into at random. In theory, the rebels could have fled into hyperspace in any direction away from Hoth, but I think they would have considered that to be even more dangerous than attempting to break through the Imperial fleet to use a known hyperspace lane.
Rogue Group, use your harpoons and tow cable.
When was Rogue Squadron created? About 1 year after the Battle of Yavin. During his adventures with the Rebellion, Luke traveled to the ashes of Jeddah, where he learned about Jyn Erso and the other heroes of Rogue One, who all perished to steal the plans to the Death Star. He learned of all the sacrifices that had to be made that allowed him to take that impossible shot. Months later, the entire Rebel fleet gathered in secret at the Mako-Ta shipyards. Their location was given to the Empire by a traitor, and Luke led a desperate and improvised squadron to buy their allies time to escape. Inspired by the members of Rogue One, he quickly named the new group of pilots Rogue Squadron, and they saved as many lives as they possibly could. Luke's actions that day helped him earn the rank of commander. How are AT-ATs deployed onto Hoth? The Empire had several options to take their various walkers from space to a planetary surface. Solo: A Star Wars Story introduced us to the AT Hauler, which delivered an AT-DT to the Battle of Mimban, but I imagine an all-terrain armored walker would have been too large for those to handle. Star Wars Rebels and Battlefront 2 have actually shown AT-ATs being delivered to the surface of Lothal and Naboo by Gazanti-class assault carriers. Those versatile ships were used for all kinds of jobs throughout the Empire. Star Wars Legends also established the Theta-class AT-AT barge, which could carry 2 walkers into battle, but the simple answer is that the Empire used dropships to deliver their massive machines of war onto the battlefield.
The shield will be down in moments.
What happened to General Veers after the Battle of Hoth? The script and novelization for the film included a scene where a snowspeeder crashed into the General's AT-AT, killing him. That was removed from the film, but was written into The Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view story, The Truest Duty. However, in that story, Veers is pulled to safety by one of his loyal pilots, TK-7834, whose name was Lastok. That character is named for the man who runs the Twitter account VeersWatch, who catalogs every appearance of his favorite character, General Maximilian Veers. Which is just one of the best things ever. A person keeping love for a very specific character alive gets to be the namesake of the character who literally saves him in universe. That's perfect. We don't know what happened to General Veers after Hoth. Despite his near death back in Episode 5, Julian Glover was invited back to have Veers leading the Battle of Endor, but was unable to fit Return of the Jedi into his schedule. In Star Wars Legends, he was seen perishing in the comic Dark Empire 2, 7 years after the Battle of Hoth.
R2.
Did Yoda forget R2-D2? Of course, at the time of the creation of The Empire Strikes Back, there would have been no reason for the two characters to know one another, but now we know they shared quite an adventure together at the end of the Clone Wars, traveling to Dagobah and the Wellspring of Life. Yoda's story by Jim Zub in The Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view makes it clear that Yoda recognized R2-D2. He didn't even seem surprised at the cycle of fate that would have brought Anakin's droid to Luke's side. I think this moment is a lot like Obi-Wan's interactions with R2 in A New Hope. Yes, they knew one another, but when Obi-Wan or Yoda didn't divulge that knowledge right away, R2-D2 seemed content to play along. Maybe the droid even thought it was funny. At least up until Yoda started whacking him with his cane, he probably wasn't crazy about that.
This ground sure feels strange.
How can everyone walk around inside the space slug without spacesuits? According to sources like The Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view, space slugs, or exogorths if you want to be technical, could live for billions of years. During that time, they grew to be so large that they contained entire ecosystems inside of them. I suppose that produced some sort of basic atmosphere as well. But the behind-the-scenes answer from the making of the film is that Star Wars isn't concerned with realism in space. In the Star Wars Archives book, George Lucas is quoted saying, "In my world, there is air in outer space, when I want it." Director of The Empire Strikes Back, Irvin Kershner, has a similar quote in a 1979 interview. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he said, "I consider Star Wars a fairy tale. In science fiction, you're very concerned about leaving a spaceship on a planet because there may not be oxygen, so you must take all that into consideration or it's considered very poor science fiction. Star Wars is a fairy tale. That's the context that you can literally do anything, and if I believe it while I'm doing it, the audience tends to believe it too."
A domain of evil it is.
What exactly is the dark side cave on Dagobah? It was a vergence in the Force, a place of powerful dark side energies. According to The Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view, it was thousands of years old and had seen countless Force users come and go. The vergence fed off of the people who entered it until it started to have an awareness of its own, learning how to twist their thoughts, memories, and fears to sate its hunger. Qui-Gon Jinn was the first presence the cave ever felt twice, and then Yoda became the only living being to return to Dagobah after experiencing its visions. And Yoda visited the Cave of Evil several times during his stay there, continuing to confront and conquer his fears. Star Wars Legends offered a different origin story in which a Jedi named Minch, who was the same species as Yoda, killed a Darkside user on Dagobah, and his Force energy infested the area, creating the Darkside Cave. What does Luke's vision in the Darkside Cave mean? This is something that can be up for debate, as I think it has many interpretations, but I'll give my take on the scene. Luke beheads Darth Vader, and the mask explodes open to reveal that it's Luke's face inside. This could be considered foreshadowing to Luke's familial connection with Vader and the fact that he is the son of one of the most feared and evil men in the galaxy, but even if that weren't the case, I think it's a symbol for the darkness within us all. Earlier, Luke told Yoda he wasn't afraid to begin his training as a Jedi, and Yoda told him he would be. One of the major themes of Star Wars is about the power that each of us have and what we choose to do with that power. Will we use our gifts and talents to help others or for selfish reasons? We all have the potential for both. As Luke grows in his own power as a Jedi, hoping to become a hero, he sees that he could just as easily become a villain. How did Boba Fett know where Han was hiding on the Star Destroyer? He's just a good, intuitive bounty hunter. He put himself in Solo's shoes, and while the other bounty hunters left the Imperial fleet to go on the hunt, he stayed behind and found the Millennium Falcon attached to the Star Destroyer Avenger. Then, like Han Solo, Fett used his own knowledge of Imperial protocols to his advantage. He faked a coolant leak to gain permission to land on the Avenger. The leak made a mess on the hangar deck, and he pretended he wasn't on board. Imperial protocol demanded the hangar be cleared before a hyperspace jump, and with no other option, the deck crew moved the Slave One to waste disposal, and there Boba Fett waited to be jettisoned to follow his quarry.
Han? Leia!
How long did Luke train with Yoda on Dagobah? We only get 3 scenes of Luke actually training, and it seems like the entire movie takes place over the course of only a few days. Dagobah, Mortis, Octo, and other locations that are very strong in the Force have been confirmed by reference materials to have their own time. In the Clone Wars, Anakin and his friends go on an entire adventure in Mortis that lasts 3 episodes, but when they return to their own realm, a matter of seconds have gone by. Luke probably experienced a similar passage of time on Dagobah. We also don't know exactly how long it took Han and Leia to reach Cloud City traveling at sublight speeds. It seems fast in the movie, but the trip could have taken a week or maybe several. The overall timeline of The Empire Strikes Back is a little hard to piece together. A historian from a certain point of view tells us that the Rebel fleet waited at the rendezvous point for at least 6 days, but that's all we can say for sure. Even though we don't have a solid answer, I think Luke was easily there for longer than it seems in the movie, getting a masterclass from one of the greatest Jedi of all time, and we, the audience, only saw his 3 most important lessons in the movie. The closest thing we have to an official answer is from Legends and the West End Games Writer's Guide, which guessed Luke experienced 6 months' worth of training. What is Cloud City? Han says it's a Tabana gas mine, but what is that, and what is Tabana gas? The city floated in orbit above the planet Bespin, which was a gas giant. The city was constructed to harvest Tabana gas from the atmosphere, where it was processed and frozen in carbonite. Tabana had many uses throughout the galaxy. It could be used as fuel or as a coolant, or it could help power hyperdrives, turbo lasers, and repulsor lifts. Some alien species, like the Mukalaran, even breathed Tabana, so it was a highly sought-after resource. What's more is Cloud City was small enough to fall outside of the notice of the Empire or the Mining Guild, which was also under the umbrella of the Empire. Of course, the events of Episode 5 changed all that.
Chuta. How rude.
What does chuta mean? Unfortunately, we don't have an answer to that. There may have been a decision to never translate it and just leave the amount of rudeness up to the audience's imagination, which I think is funny. The book How Not to Get Eaten by Ewoks and Other Galactic Survival Skills says that a chuta is a friendly Huttese greeting, but chuta means something impossibly rude. Ben Burt, who created the phrase, said it wasn't appropriate to translate in his Legends Galactic Phrasebook and Travel Guide. And the young reader adaptation of The Empire Strikes Back, called So You Want to Be a Jedi, says it is absolutely not appropriate to translate, maybe when you're older. Chuta has popped up in several Star Wars stories, and I don't think we'll ever find out what it really means, but I think F you or F off or maybe even something worse makes sense. Pick your favorite 4-letter word and go with that. Why doesn't Lobot talk? What is his deal? He actually used to talk, as we can see in the excellent Lando comic by Charles Soule. In that story, we learn that he was given the cybernetic implants by the Empire to analyze battle statistics, but he got away from the Empire and became close friends with Lando Calrissian. Lobot was able to mentally fight the implants from completely taking over his personality until one fateful job. They were hired to steal some artifacts from a ship, which turned out to belong to none other than Emperor Palpatine. Lobot was injured by a royal guard during the mission, and later the ship was set to self-destruct. To save his friends, Lobot had to allow the implants to take over his mind so they could activate the escape pods at the expense of his personality. Lando continued to keep Lobot by his side as he searched for a cure, but the reason for Lobot's silence in the movie is that he sacrificed what made him who he was to save his friend.
There is another.
Who was the other Yoda spoke of? Did George Lucas always intend for it to be Leia? The short answer is no, he didn't, at least not during the creation of The Empire Strikes Back, or else he probably wouldn't have had them kiss. The longer answer is that, according to the making of Star Wars, George did have the idea to make Luke and Leia twins as far back as 1975. He decided not to go that direction in A New Hope and stuck with the Luke, Han, Leia love triangle in The Empire Strikes Back, but Yoda's line, "There is another," was still meant to foreshadow Luke meeting his sister in future movies. Producer Gary Kurtz claimed it would have happened in Episode 8. The plan was for her to be a completely new character, basically being trained as a Jedi on the other side of the universe, so she and Luke would be two individual heroes ready to rise up against the Empire. But when Return of the Jedi rolled around and Lucas decided he would only finish this trilogy and then the prequels, he decided to combine the sister character with Leia. A decision he admitted in the making of Return of the Jedi was a real challenge to make sincere and believable. Is that IG-88 in Cloud City? In Star Wars Legends, the answer is definitely yes. The book Tales of the Bounty Hunters said that 5 models of IG-88 were activated, and IG-88B had a run-in with Boba Fett on Cloud City during the hunt for the Millennium Falcon. He was defeated and left for scrap, as we can see in the movie. Technically, there is a canon reference book that mentions this story, but that specific book, Ultimate Star Wars, has several errors in it. The War of the Bounty Hunters comics show IG-88 confronting and being defeated by Boba Fett on Tatooine, not Cloud City, so I would consider that the canon version of the story. The droid remains in Cloud City are likely just another random IG model, the same way there are also the remains of an LOM series protocol droid that isn't for LOM. That said, this is just my own opinion and preference. There could absolutely be an argument for IG-88 losing a fight on Cloud City and then being reactivated to face him again on Tatooine, or that could be another IG-88 copy or something.
We would be honored if you would join us.
How did the Empire beat the Millennium Falcon to Cloud City? A bounty hunter as skilled as Boba Fett would have been able to deduce exactly where Han would have headed after the asteroid field. They had limited range thanks to their broken hyperdrive, and surely Fett would have known that Lando Calrissian was an ally to the scoundrel. He definitely knew of their history in Star Wars Legends. Once he figured out Cloud City was their destination, he contacted the Empire, and they were able to jump ahead to Bespin through hyperspace while the Falcon limped along at sublight speeds. That gave Darth Vader plenty of time to be extra dramatic, setting up a little dinner party and everything. Speaking of that dinner, did Darth Vader actually have dinner with everyone on Cloud City? Obviously, since the scene isn't shown, everything is left up to the audience's interpretation, but I personally think that it's likely a meal was at least served. According to the annotated screenplay of The Empire Strikes Back, the story treatment did feature a scene where the whole group sat down to eat, but Lando was the only one with an appetite. During the meal, Vader would have divulged his whole plan to use Han and Leia as bait for Luke, but it was decided that leaving the scene up to the imagination behind closed doors made Vader and the scene more menacing. I will also point out that there is a story in The Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view all about the chef that prepared the food for that meal, but it ends before we get to see if it's ever served or if anyone takes a bite. And I would also regret not including Robot Chicken's version of the scene as well.
We only use this facility for carbon freezing. You put him in there, it might kill him.
Shouldn't Darth Vader know carbon freezing wasn't lethal? In the Clone Wars, we see Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka Tano, and several clones freeze themselves in carbonite to smuggle themselves past sensor scans to infiltrate a separatist prison, and nobody dies. In The Empire Strikes Back, Vader is not the one to bring up any concerns about the process, instead it's Lando. Vader simply admits that the carbon freezing facility is crude. Cloud City, hovering in the Outer Rim above Bespin, likely had far worse equipment than the Galactic Republic would have on Coruscant. So Darth Vader knew a person could survive being frozen in carbonite as long as the machinery was in working order. That's why they tested the process on Han Solo first, to make sure it wouldn't be malfunctioning in any way. Why did Darth Vader stop Boba Fett from shooting Chewbacca? There are a few potential answers for this. First, his entire goal in that scene is to test the carbon freezing chamber on a living person. If Boba Fett starts blasting, a stray bolt could hit Han or Leia or damage the machinery. Not to mention, if all of his captives were dead, Luke would have no reason to fall into Vader's trap. There was no practical reason to let things escalate, especially with Boba Fett around, who the film earlier establishes as a bit of a loose cannon. Vader is luring Luke to Cloud City by causing pain in his friends, and Chewbacca's pain at losing Han would be immense. The Darth Vader comics by Greg Pak also show that Vader wanted to continue dangling a thread of hope in front of Luke. He wanted Luke to believe he and their friends continued to survive because of the strength of their bond, when in reality, at least in Vader's eyes, he was manipulating them all the time. So basically, killing Chewbacca was not a part of Vader's vision for this trap, so he stopped Boba Fett from opening fire. What is in Willrow Hood ice cream maker? I mean, his camtono. We don't currently know exactly, but we do know it was something valuable. It's kind of like how we don't know what's in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. The From a Certain Point of View story due on Batuu gives us some of the details. Hoping to one day become his own boss, Willrow was interested in becoming a smuggler, so he got a job from a friend of his in the business named Farron. He was given a 10,000 credit advance to deliver whatever was in the camtono to someone on Batuu in 10 days. If he pulled it off, he would receive 40,000 additional credits. His escape happened to coincide with the evacuation of Cloud City, and as he fled, he bumped into Farron, who attempted to take the camtono back, and in their struggle, they broke whatever was inside. Farron abandoned the item, and Willrow escaped the city with a pilot friend, deciding to go anywhere in the galaxy except for Batuu.
I am your father.
Did George Lucas always know Darth Vader was going to be Luke's father? Lucas himself has told contradictory stories about this, but I think the likeliest answer is no, especially when you look at the development of A New Hope. The second and third drafts of the film included death scenes for Vader. The third draft included memories Luke had of his father before he died. Recordings from 1975 suggest that there is more to Vader's identity, but also talk about showing the battle in which Luke's father is killed in the prequels. The making of The Empire Strikes Back talks about a meeting where the identity of Luke's father was discussed and changed as the story developed. Story ideas as late as 1978 thought to bring in Anakin's Force Ghost alongside Obi-Wan's to reveal that Luke had a sister. It appears that the second draft of the script, written in that same year, was the first time Lucas had settled on Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker being the same character. Why did Darth Vader let Admiral Piett live at the end of The Empire Strikes Back? He had no problem killing off Admiral Ozzel or Captain Needa, so why was Piett spared? The character wasn't originally meant to appear in Return of the Jedi, but according to actor Kenneth Cawley, fan mail supporting his return convinced George Lucas to bring him back. I imagine Piett likely was going to be presumed dead and killed off-screen in between episodes 5 and 6, but since he was brought back for Return of the Jedi, why did Vader let him live? The Darth Vader comics by Greg Pak basically show the immediate aftermath of The Empire Strikes Back, and the Sith Lord seems to be completely preoccupied with thoughts of his past, which came back to the surface after revealing his identity to Luke. He directed his rage at the Emperor, Obi-Wan, the Lars family, and everyone else who kept his son's existence a secret, leaving immediately on a new mission. Piett was just an insignificant footnote for Vader on that day, which was lucky for him. What did the rest of the rebellion do while Luke and the others were gone? Wedge's story in The Empire Strikes Back from a certain point of view tells us that the fleet waited for Luke and Leia for at least 6 days. They had no idea where either had run off to, if they had been captured, or worse, killed. But they refused to give up hope. A nearby pirate group began ambushing rebel supply ships, and it became a growing concern that the pirates would discover and sell the fleet's location. Wedge Antilles was promoted to flight commander in Luke's stead, and he quickly assembled and trained a new squadron to destroy the pirates and keep their location a secret so they could continue to wait for Luke and Leia's return. Those events took 6 days. We don't know how long the fleet waited beyond that time. Why is Lando wearing Han's clothes as he leaves the rebel fleet? Lando fled Cloud City in a hurry with only the cape on his back. Oh no, he didn't even have a cape, poor guy. Anyway, Han Solo made a ton of changes to the Millennium Falcon when he won it from Lando years earlier, and I'm sure the cape closet was first to go. In its place were probably just rows and rows of shirts and black vests, so that's what Lando had to work with. The Star Wars comics show that he wasted no time finding some more stylish clothing to fit with his sense of fashion. Behind the scenes, Harrison Ford was unsure if he wanted to return to film a third Star Wars movie, and so the story allowed for him to be removed but not dead. There were options for the future. If Harrison decided not to return, Billy D. Williams would be available to take his place as the lovable scoundrel character. The costume could have been a way to subconsciously prepare audiences for that possibility. What is this galaxy-looking object at the end of The Empire Strikes Back? The original script and the novelization for Empire describe the celestial body outside of the window as a large red star. ILM at some points called it a nebula, and you can find images of some of their attempts to create a red nebula in behind-the-scenes sources for the movie. For some reason, the nebula concept was scrapped in favor of something that resembles a galaxy, probably just because they thought it looked cool. But according to Lucasfilm Story Group members, it is a protostar, which is basically the early formation of a new star. So I would say Luke and Leia are looking at the creation of a new star system. But also, it doesn't really matter. Like I said, I'm sure the image was chosen because it looked cool and interesting first and foremost. But for now, the current and official answer is that it's a protostar and not a galaxy. And that brings us to the end of the 40 most frequently asked questions I've seen about The Empire Strikes Back. I'm sure there are more great questions I missed, so leave yours in the comments. If you liked this video, check out the one I've already done answering 40 frequently asked questions for A New Hope. I'm also hard at work on Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace right now. Make sure you catch those by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, following us on our socials, and please consider checking out our Patreon page for even more Star Wars talk. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.